Hey folks, Zach Osterman here. I am Insider Indianapolis Stars, your Friday rundown for November 3rd, 2023. Obviously, it's been a busy week, and it's been a particularly eventful and for a lot of people very sad, obviously, couple of days. Bob Knight's passing on Wednesday. Not a lot to add here in this, to be honest with you, that you can't already find at indystar.com/sports. A whole team of us, frankly, have written about this. I've written, I think, 4 or 5 different stories, just kind of trying to approach Knight's legacy from a lot of different perspectives. Greg Doyle's written on it, Kyle Neddenreeb, Dana Benbow, Chronic Hoosier joined me on the podcast yesterday to discuss, just kind of Knight's legacy and the enduring, good and bad. Obviously, the sort of enduring memory he'll leave behind. Again, it would encourage you, indystar.com/sports or indystar.com/sports/Hoosiers if you want to go that far down the tab, and then mind your banners wherever you get your podcast, whatever platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever it might be. Always appreciate the likes and subscribes on that, and even if you don't do that, you please just give the podcast a listen, because Chronic and I, kind of dove deep into that. But just, first and foremost, direct everybody kind of back to that, because I think that's, I feel pretty confident in saying there's a real depth to our coverage in terms of exploring a lot of different, as I said, perspectives of Bob Knight's, life, his IU tenure, and his career. So, talking first about football this weekend, 3 keys that I'll be watching against Wisconsin. The first one's Brendan Sorsby, and he's kind of, as much as he can be for his age and his experience, kind of settled into Indiana's starting job now. And I think you saw. Listen, there were a couple moments when he was taking advantage, maybe of some coverage busts against Penn State last weekend, but you saw what a confident, settled quarterback can do for an offense last weekend when Indiana played Penn State so close. How does Sorsby basically build on that? And I think that there's a wider question of how Indiana builds on that performance, and we'll get to that in a minute. But, one of the easiest ways you can build on something like that is by following the lead of your quarterback. And Sorsby had, without a doubt, his best game, I think it's fair to say, in an Indiana uniform last Saturday at Penn State. Can he build on that against a Wisconsin team that's good, but probably not as good as the Nittany Lions, and certainly, obviously, not in an environment as hostile as Happy Valley. So, first one is just kind of how Brendan Sorsby continues to progress in that job, in that role, and in that job, now that we have maybe seen him start to kind of show some flashes, start to look a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more in rhythm. Can he have the kind of breakout performance that maybe brings Indiana a first win in a while? Number 2 is just Wisconsin personnel. Tanner Mordecai's out. The player who was their starting quarterback at the beginning of the season, I don't think he's expected back for this game. He broke his hand, if I'm not mistaken. By all accounts, it seems more likely than not Braylon Allen won't play in this game. He sustained an injury last weekend in the loss to Ohio State. His backup's not available. Wisconsin's going to be down to 2s and 3s in 2 of its most important offensive positions, in quarterback and running back. That's got to be something Indiana can take. Indiana's got to find ways to take advantage of that. I mean, it sounds simplistic, but it's true. This is an opportunity to build on the momentum of even in a loss that you may have created for yourself in that Penn State game. Come home, you're getting Wisconsin at a time that's probably more favorable, certainly from a personnel perspective. You can't waste that. You can't sort of shrug at that. You can't just let that go if you're Indiana. So that's number 2 is just kind of, does Braylon Allen play? If he does, what's he look like? If he doesn't, just basically – Wisconsin's probably going to be in a spot with some backups in some key roles. Offensively, Saturday, can Indiana take advantage? And then the third thing that I would say is, and this is a little bit simplistic, but last week we talked about a response on this video we talked about maybe needing to see Indiana go to Penn State and show something of itself, and show that maybe it was still capable of digging its heels into the ground and pushing back and fighting up, and that it wasn't done punching. And whatever else happened, I think it's fair to say Indiana showed that. Indiana kind of offered that response. Didn't get the results it wanted necessarily, but it offered that response. Now do that in a game where there's a little bit more pressure because there's more opportunity to win. Bad teams can go away from home against good teams, and if they catch them on the hop, if they catch them at the right time, they can play without any real expectation, without any real pressure, without any real fear. They can play loose. They can play, just sort of confident because there's no real penalty for them. If Indiana had lost that game by 20 points, no one would have said a thing. No one would have batted an eye. And so, bad teams usually can't find that consistency. Can Indiana rise above that? Can Indiana be the team that does find that consistency? If you put that performance in from Penn State against Wisconsin on Saturday, and Wisconsin is a little bit undermanned, then I think Indiana has every chance to win that game, to be honest. But you've got to prove it. You've got to prove that you have the ability to take the sort of the successes and the strengths and the positives of 1 week and carry them over and build on them into another. Indiana has not done that to this point in the season, but we always knew the schedule was front-loaded, that Indiana was going to be done with Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Louisville, probably fair at this point to say Maryland, all within the first 8 weeks, or at least within the first 8 games. I'm not sitting here predicting Indiana's going to a bowl game, to be very clear, but you find your way to win this game, and then if you can find your way to repeat the process next week at Illinois, then suddenly you're 4-6, and that's probably not statistically likely, but it's not a shoot the moon proposition either. It's within the realms of possibility. And then you're playing a Michigan State team at home that's reeling and is probably going to be sort of one eye on the end of the season and one eye on the future by that point. And then if you win that game, suddenly you're 5-6 going into the bucket game, and some things are kind of back on the table for you. But you've got, if you're Indiana, you've got to make your own luck. You have got to sort of, put yourself on that path by building on and showing the consistency to be able to build on what you did last week at Penn State this week against Wisconsin. So those are the 3 keys I'll be looking at on Saturday. Between now and then, Indiana does play its exhibition finale. Marian's in town. Steve Downing, the athletic director, of course, at Marian. Scott Heddy, the longtime Carmel coach, the head coach there. It's just another data point, but I think it is, because we had so many questions about this basketball team, off-season, preseason, what are guys' roles, where would things fit, what's good, what's bad. It does feel like every 40 minutes we get for a little while here is going to, bring, just clarify and bring things into focus a lot more dramatically than normal. Because there just is, quite frankly, such a volume of stuff to learn about Indiana. And, tonight, obviously, I think there'll be a lot of emotion inside of Assembly Hall for Bob Knight, in the wake of his passing. I think, there will be, obviously, goals or things Mike Woodson wants to sort of check off his list in terms of stuff he wants to tinker with or check on or try. But, this game combined with some of the early season non-conference home games, it really will just kind of be fascinating to stack these up after a few weeks and a couple, 3 weeks and sort of say, okay, what do we feel like we learned? What do we feel like is developed? What's still a work in progress? Where can Indiana get better? Where are they better than expected, worse than expected, etc.? It's going to be a fascinating, just kind of time. I think this evening will be interesting, and I think the wider sort of question of these first few games, maybe even the whole first month of the season, and that would include, of course, the games in New York, feel like they're going to be a real time for sort of all of us to thicken and clarify our thoughts on this team and its capacity moving into January, February, March. So we'll leave this there for now. A lot of ground to cover. There's even more. Indiana's honoring the 2013 College World Series baseball team this weekend. I talked to Kyle Hart. That's also on the podcast. Kyle Hart, who was the Saturday starter for that Indiana team that won the Big Ten double, the regular season and the tournament championship. Of course, famously won its regional and then swept Florida State in 2 games to go to Omaha, where it won. It beat Louisville before losing a pair of 1-run games to Oregon State and Mississippi State. We'll have more on that, and I suspect that there will be more on Indiana's channels as well. I think there's a real eagerness to celebrate that group, and not just what it achieved then, but to some extent how those achievements have been built on here in just the last 10 years, and what Indiana baseball's become in part because of players like that in the season they had. So that'll be kind of a fun watch, I suspect, for IU fans. But again, Marian exhibition 6:30 Friday. IU Wisconsin noon Saturday. It's a busy weekend. We'll be there for all of it. Until then, for the Indianapolis Star, I'm Zach Osterman. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon.